I'm going to work through a juniper, an Itoyagawa Shinpaku, on behalf of another professional at his request. And so to do that, the approach is going to be not to hyperly defoliate or aggressively defoliate and restyle, but rather to take a tree that is relatively bushy at this point in time and put in some fine lines and basically shape the silhouette such that when he wants to display the tree next week, it will look full and clean in the shape that it is now, right? There will be no major angle changes or anything like that. We're gonna take the tree with the front that it has in the pot that it has now, and we're gonna tweak it. This is a subtle work, a subtle approach. This is field grown material. I'll give you a once around, and I hope that on the detail cam I can zoom in to show you what indications I'm looking at to let me know that it's field grown material. So a pretty decent tree. Nothing to write home about, but still a very beautiful tree. If we look deep inside, hopefully you can see this on the detail cam, and you can see these, hey puppy. You can see all these little like pock marks on the trunk and on some of the structural branches. So these are actually adventitious roots that are growing out of the trunk here. 1, 2, all these little dots all along. So if we're seeing that on these trees, there's an indication that that they're very, very young field-grown stock. Again, the work that you're doing is based on what you're trying to accomplish. And so if there's a thing that you're saying, oh, well, I want to actually restyle this tree, you might be choosing to cut back to crotch growth to drastically reduce the length of a branch system. So crotch growth is not always, it's not black and white. Crotch growth is not always a problem. It actually could be quite useful in some situations. But for this tree, in the scope of work that we're doing here, right, the goal here is to clean this thing up, get the silhouette nice, get some pads organized in this thing, and have it look nice for the customer now, right? We're talking about subtlety rather than drastic change. And in that sense, for this tree at this point in time, the crotch growth is unnecessary and in the way, right? It becomes visually noisy inside of the tree. And so the easiest thing to deal with that is to just go through and clean out the crotches as we go. So there's this issue, this concern, this aesthetic juxtaposition, let's call it. And I think describing it on junipers is probably a great subject matter example to discuss this issue. Aesthetically speaking, kind of what I see as the biggest difference between the Japanese mindset of bonsai aesthetics and kind of maybe what we'll call like the new school of American aesthetics is the relative sparseness of the foliage mass after styling, right? And it's very important in Japan for me to, how do I describe this situation? The risk that I run in working on this tree is that after I'm finished working on this tree, someone will look at it and either say out loud or think to themselves, the tree is too bare and thus it looks too young. So inside of the Japanese aesthetic for bonsai, a thick, full foliage mass is desirable, right? You don't You want, regardless of the shape, right? Regardless of the shape, you're talking about trees that foliage pads are thick, full, and in that sense, mature. So knowing that this is the general aesthetic of Japanese bonsai, if I were to come in here and cut back and reduce this foliage mass here, and trim this back down and try to reduce this foliar mass into kind of these singular frond pads and lay them out, everyone is going to look at it and think, whether or not it's good and the style or wiring technique is acceptable, or whether or not in 5 years it's going to look awesome, the immediate response to it right now will be, you cut too much off. It looks too young.